Hi and welcome to Beat the Teacher. The aim of this video is to test your knowledge of object-oriented programming. You'll see at the top of the screen there is a timer counting down. Pause the video when you've completed the challenge. Beating the timer means you beat the teacher. A correct answer gets you 2 points. A partially correct answer gets you 1 point. Any time left on the clock is your bonus score. There are 20 questions. I got 40 points. Can you beat it? Okay, let's look at challenge 1 then. So with challenge 1, we're going to use this class diagram and we're going to create the superclass here of item in pseudocode. I'm going to try and use the same colours as much as I can, and therefore I'm going to create class of item. So you can see it's coming from here. We're then going to create the attributes here. So therefore these are going to be private because they're within the class. So therefore private title, private author, private year, and private is borrowed. Notice the capital B there, that just makes it easier to read, a common programming convention. That's the only reason it's there. We're then going to create the procedure for this. So the procedure is going to be public. That's because it's going to be used outside of the class. So it's a procedure. And what it's going to do is we're going to be creating new data for within the attributes, and therefore new. It's going to be creating this new class. I'm going to open the brackets and then we'll put parameters here. In other words, the data that's coming from outside of the class that's going into it. But I'm going to leave that blank for the time being because I just want to explain where they're going to come from. So what I need to do, therefore, is to create the attributes that are going to be taken from the new data. So we're going to have these, in other words. So title, author, year, and is borrowed. Okay. So with the parameters, it would make sense that because we're updating these attributes, we would write here title, author, year, etc. However, if we therefore pass the parameter to here, we would then write title. In other words, title is equal to title, which would be confusing and wouldn't make sense. So what we need to do therefore is give a new name to the parameter, which can then be written here, so we can see that it's the parameter that's updating the attribute of title. And therefore there can be different things you could use this. For this, you could call it a P title, you could call it new title. I'm just going to call it given title, just for sake of argument. In fact, I'm going to put that in a different colour. So I'm going to call it given title. Okay, this one I'll call given author and given year. Now the final one's quite interesting because this is Boolean. It's standard that this is taken as false. What that means is I don't actually have to pass this is borrowed as a parameter, because it's expected that it will be false. It would only need to be if it was being updated and being made true, in other words. So now that I've got my parameters, I need to include them up here, and therefore I need to write in the given title, given author, and given year. And then I just need to close bracket here, like so. And then, as good practice for these things, we need to close everything off. So just close off the bracket. I need to close here the procedure, and I need to then close the class. So end class. And therefore, if we're creating a new superclass, it would look like so. Challenge 2 is to add a borrow method. Okay, so we're looking at our class diagram. We can see that the borrow is here. So therefore, the name of our procedure will be borrow. So I'm going to put the borrow there so you can see it, like so. But we need to set up the procedure. This procedure is public because it's coming from elsewhere, and it's going to be a procedure as well. So public, and it's a procedure because it's just carrying out an action. Okay. What we need to do is we need to decide which attribute is going to be updated. And in this case, it's going to be the is borrowed. So therefore, is borrowed. And we're going to set it to true. And as always is good practice, we're then going to end the procedure. Okay, there you go. Challenge 3 is to add a return item method. So you can see we've got the method here, and therefore I'll just write that in green. So it's going to be return item. Again, this is going to be a procedure because something's going to make something happen, and it's going to be public because it's coming outside of the class. So therefore, public procedure. We're again looking at which of the attributes is going to be affected. It's going to be these borrowed in this case. So, oops, wrong way around. Is borrowed. And again, we're going to now be, because it's returned, we're now going to set it to false because it's no longer being borrowed, is it? And again, just as before, we need to end the procedure. Challenge 4 then is to add a getTitle method. So what we're going to do therefore is we're going to look at the methods. You can see it's here, getTitle, and therefore we'll include that. This is going to be a function this time. The reason it's going to be a function is because it's going to return the value that's in the attribute of title. So therefore, we need function, and because it's a function, it's going to return as well. It's a public function because it's coming outside of the class, and therefore it's a public function. Like I said, it's going to return something. It's going to return the attribute of title, and therefore, oops, we'll return title. And then finally, because we've started the function, we need to close the function. I need one-ended of these, don't I really? We're going to end the function like so. Challenge 5 is to create the book subclass. So this book is a subclass, so that's quite important. So we're going to create the class just like we did before when we created the item class. That bit's identical. However, because this is a subclass, it's going to inherit from the item, and therefore we need to write the word inherits. What that means then is it's going to take it from somewhere, and we're going to tell it where. Item. What we then need to do is set up, just like we did when we created this, we needed to set up the attributes. So we're going to do the same here. Oops. So therefore it's private because it's working within the class, and it's called genre. So therefore we set up the attribute. Then all we need to do now is to actually set up the procedure itself. This procedure is going to be able to be working outside of the class, therefore it's going to be public and procedure, and it's going to be creating a new class, and therefore we write the word new. I'm just going to leave this bit blank for a moment. I'm just going to come back to that. You'll see why in a moment. And what we need to do therefore is pass in what we're going to be sort of changing or inheriting. So we need to bring in the attributes. So we want to bring these ones in. They're all in the super class, so rather than have to write them all out, what we can do instead is just write the word super, includes them all. And again, it's going to be new. What we're also going to do is bring in the genre, and therefore we're going to bring in genre. Remember, we're going to assign something to genre, but it wouldn't make sense to write genre here, and therefore we need to give a new updated name, don't we? Just like we did when we created the item one, and therefore let's go with the same convention of naming, and therefore we'll be given genre. We're going to use the same attributes as we did before, so we're going to have given title, given author, and given year. And then we need to then pass these parameters into the procedure itself. So therefore writing up here, so given title, given author, given year, and given genre. What we don't need to do is pass the is borrowed attribute, because that's Boolean, and therefore is taken as standard that it's going to be false. It would only be if we were wanting to update it to be true that we would need to then include this to actually make that change. So I've opened brackets, so I need to make sure I close them. Again, I've opened brackets here, so I need to make sure I close them. I've opened a procedure, so I need to close the procedure, and therefore end procedure. And I've opened a class, and therefore need to close the class. Okay, challenge 6 then. Challenge 6 is to add a method of read to book. And with this, what we're going to be doing effectively is saying like some sort of output that shows what's being sort of read at this time. Okay, so we're going to use a procedure, and this procedure will be public because again it's being used outside of the class, and it's going to use the method here from the book class of read. What it's going to do is just do a simple thing of outputting, so it could be a print, whatever we need. Because we're doing pseudocode, though, we can just write output, and then we need to decide what it's actually going to output. So it's, in this case, it could just be a sentence saying what you're reading plus whatever the title is of the book. So in other words, the attribute of title. And then all we need to do is then just end our procedure. Like so. Challenge 7, create the magazine subclass. So just like we did with before with the book subclass, we're going to create the class and it will inherit from item. So therefore we're going to have class magazine, which inherits from item. We need to then bring in our attributes. So in this case, it's going to be the issue number that's the new one. So again, it's within the class, so therefore it's private. And then remember, we don't need these because these are already within the class of item and therefore are being inherited anyway. What we then need to do is just write the procedure for this. So it's going to be a procedure. We're creating a new subclass, and it's going to be working outside of the overall class, and therefore will be public as a procedure. I'm going to leave this blank again, just like I've done before for the parameters, so we'll just come back to that. So the first thing we need to do is say that we want to use the item, so therefore we need super to do so. It'll be in the super class, and again we're going to be creating new for it. And then we also have our issue number coming in. So just as we've had before, it wouldn't really make sense to write issue number again here, so we need a new name, and therefore let's go with given issue. Let's stick with the previous convention, and therefore we need to also bring in the new names that we had for those attributes up here. So if you remember, we use given again in all of those, so therefore we'd have given title, given author, and given year. And then again up here we need to then pass those into the procedure. So again, we'll just write those again. So given title, given author, given year, and the given issue. And to remind you, we don't need to write these borrowed because these borrowed is Boolean, and therefore as standard it's taken that it's false, which is what we currently have. It would only be if we were updating that to be true that we would need to include it as a parameter at this point. So we can close that one, close this one. Again, we've opened a procedure here, so you need to end the procedure. And again, we've opened the class, so therefore we need to end the class. Challenge 8 is to add a method for flip from the magazine class. What we mean by flip is just like flipping through the pages, which is kind of a natural kind of action, isn't it, with a magazine. So this is going to be a procedure. And again, it's coming from outside of the class, therefore making it public. And we're going to use the method of flip. Like so. We are wanting it to do something, and therefore because it's flipping, we can just sort of say you're flipping through, you're looking at, whatever it might be, and therefore we're going to have an input of flipping through, and again the title of this, so which if you remember is going from up here, and therefore title. So it's a bit neat. And then we just need to end the procedure like so. Challenge 9, create DVD subclass. So we've done this a couple of times already now, haven't we, with these two? So it's going to be the same process, so we can do this quite quickly really. So class of DVD, which inherits from item. It has the private attribute of duration, and then we need to write the procedure for it. So our procedure is going to be public because it's going to happen outside of the class, and it's a procedure, and it's going to be creating a new instance of the class, and therefore it's going to have some parameters. It's going to have the attributes coming from item because it's inheriting, and therefore if you remember again we can use the word super for those, and again it's going to be creating a new instance of them. And then again here we're going to have duration as an attribute. If you remember again before this, we need to give this a new name, so therefore given duration, and then we're going to use title, author and year for here, so therefore given title, given author, and given year. And again all of them need to then be passed as parameters into the procedure. So again, given title, given author, given year, and given duration. Again, as a reminder, we don't need to bring in the is borrowed because it's, if you remember, the convention is that it's expected that it's already false. You're just updating it to true later on if needed. We need to now just close and end our procedure. And then finally, end the class. And we're done. Challenge 10 is to add play to DVD. So here, so we're going to just write a simple procedure. So public procedure. We know it's public because it's outside of the class, and it's going to be for the method of play. Just like we had before, we're going to have some sort of thing happen whenever we want it to do. So let's just, again, just do an output like we've done before, of which it's going to be what's playing currently, plus, again, one of our attributes. So therefore, let's have title. So as we're playing, whichever thing is there. And again, we just need to end our procedure. So nice and easy. Okay, challenge 11. So instantiate a book. So the book we'll call B1, so we can find it later and know which data this is referring to. And then the book is coming from the subclass of book. So we're going to create a new one of it. So new book. Now, what's interesting about this is that we aren't just updating the genre. We're going to obviously update the title, author, and year, and etc. as well. But we don't need to write that. We don't need to write new book and item, because when we set up the class structure for book, we had it inheriting anyway. So that's kind of already kind of included, if you like. So all we need to now do is update it with some data. And therefore the data we're going to bring in this case, I'm going to do 1984, George Orwell, written in 1949, and let's say it's dystopian as a genre. And we're done. Okay, challenge 12. Challenge 12 is to instantiate a magazine. Well, I've left on the previous one just so again we can see it and we can refer to them both, then it helps us kind of see what's going on. So again, we've got the instance of it, so M1. In other words, if we ever call M1, we'll be able to find this data that we've put in. This is going to be a new magazine. So new magazine. And again, we just put some data in. Just like before, it's going to also use the attributes of the item. and therefore we're going to put in our data. So let's put in National Geographic by various authors, if you like. And then we could have the year be 2024, and the issue number would be, say, 307. That's what we're referring to. And again, we just close the bracket. Do challenge 13. Challenge 13 then is to borrow and return a DVD. So we haven't actually created a DVD yet, so therefore we need to do so. So I'm going to call this one D1 for DVD 1, and I need to set the data that goes in there. We know as before that this is going to be using the class of DVD, which also inherits from the item class. I'm going to put my data in, so therefore let's put Inception. It's going to be by Christopher Nolan. It's out in 2010, and the duration of it is 148 minutes. Like so. What we want to do then is borrow this book. So we know that we have the method here of borrow. So in other words, we're going to put in what we're going to borrow. So D1, we use a full stop, and then we put in the borrow method that we're using. So get the right pen. Borrow, like so. We are also asked to return the book as well. So again, we're going to do this to D1. So not a book, is it a DVD? Sorry. And again, D1, full stop. And again, we need the correct method, which is to return item, and therefore return item, like so. Okay, there's a new method being added to the table of check out. Okay, challenge 14 is to use polymorphism with borrow. What I've actually got is an additional method here, so just worth noting that that is now in the class diagram. It wasn't before. Okay, I'm going to be using that for the procedure. Okay, so we've got a procedure. It's going to be carrying this out, and it's going to use that brand new method. So check out. Now notice we've got the brackets with something that's going to go inside it. Okay, what's actually going to go inside it is item. In other words, the class here. So item. Again, just close the brackets on that. Okay, what we're then going to do is, just like before when we had the DVD or the book and the magazine, if you remember, we called them like B1, M1, D1. Well, we did this, didn't we? We wrote it and then we used a full stop. In other words, it's going to be applied to that thing. So this is going to be applied to the class. So now we're going to use the method of borrow. Oops. In other words, it's going to be applied to anything that is within that class. And then we're just going to end the procedure. Okay, so what we need to do now is decide what we want it to apply to. So we have these different bits of data now, don't we, within the class, and we're therefore going to use so our method of checkout, and this is the part where the actual polymorphism is going to happen. So checkout, and then if you remember, we had like B1 and M1. So in other words, if we apply it to B1, the data that was used before is going to have this procedure applied to it. Again, if we do the same thing again, so checkout, and again, we had D1, didn't we, before? So D1. In other words, the same procedure is being polymorphed. It's applying it across different data types. We've got a book here in this class, and we've got a DVD coming from this class. So they're both the different classes, but they're having the same procedure applied to them. That makes sense. Challenge 15 says use get title for a search display. In other words, we're going to just output something, so therefore output. And we also need to decide what we're actually going to output. So we need some data that we've used before. So let's use B1. So that's our book one that we've created. If you remember, that was the George Orwell book. And we need to do something to it. We need to apply a method. So we've been asked to get the get title, which is the method here, and therefore that's what we'll do. So get title, like so. Okay, challenge 16 then. Challenge 16 is wanting us to use an array of book awards, and then it's going to store different data about books that have had awards given to them. And we've been asked to give it the data of Hobbit, J.R.R. Tolkien, and the year 1937. And this has got to be stored in the index of 5. Okay, so in other words, because we have our index we know is called Book Awards. And it's an array, and therefore this is going to go into location 5. And then all we're doing is we're doing what we've done previously with this. We're just going to do a new. It's going to use the class of book, and we're just going to then put in the data for it. So our data coming through will therefore be Hobbit, J.R.R. Tolkien, and 1937. And we're done. Okay, challenge 17. So challenge 17 is override borrow in DVD to show a message. So in other words, we've got a public procedure. And we know we're using borrow. And then we just need to do what we're going to do with it. So what we're saying is that the we're going to override the borrow, and therefore whatever is currently there, we're going to override that with something else. And therefore, because we know that the is borrowed is currently set as false, we're going to override that to true, like so. We're going to then return, sorry, no we're not, we're going to output, sorry, whatever we want it to say, and we can say something like, please return in 5 days, like so. And then we can then just end the procedure. Okay, another method has been added to the class diagram of describe. So challenge 18 is to print details of any item using a new method. So I've added in a new method of describe. We're just going to do that function then. So it's a function because it's going to return something. In other words, it's going to return the data that's there. So therefore, it's going to be public. It's going to be, because it's outside of the class, therefore it's a function, and therefore we get our now describe method being used. We're going to return, like we said before, which what makes it a function, and then we're going to decide what we want it to do. So we want it to return the title, we want it to perhaps make sense as well, so author, and like so. So in other words, it's going to say, for example, we just had The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien from the year being 1937. We need to then just end that function. And then we need to just decide what we're going to output. So we're going to output, in other words, a bit like a print, and we're going to output what have we had? We've had B1 earlier, haven't we, as a book. So B1, and then we're just going to use that method of describe. Okay, another method of set year has been added to the class diagram. Okay, challenge 19 prevents setting the year before 1500. So we're preventing really old books getting put in either accidentally for like a validation purpose, or kind of, perhaps we just want to put some sort of restriction anyway on the data that's been added. So we've got a new method here, set year, which we can use, and therefore we're going to have our public, because it's outside of the class, procedure. We're going to use that set year, so just ignore that, set year, and then within here we need to pass the parameter. Now we're going to be talking about this attribute of year, but remember we don't write year here, we need it to be something new that goes into it, and therefore it'll be given year. Okay. Then we're going to have some sort of criteria now, aren't we? This is our if statement effectively. So if the given year is greater or equal to 1500, then we'll actually allow that, won't we? So therefore then year is equal to given year. Then we need our else. So therefore else, we just want some sort of output. So output equals, or is, in other words, is invalid year. So we've stopped the mistake. Then we just need to end the if. So paper won't let me write. And we just need to end the procedure, don't we? End procedure. So I'm going to hand over that. So there you go. Challenge 20 is to compare two books by year. So we're going to do some sort of if statement, aren't we, to actually compare. We have previously had data for B1, so let's use that one. So B1 we had before, we knew it was a full stop, and then we'd have the attribute of year, which is what we're comparing, isn't it? We by the year. Then we can do a comparison. So greater or less than. We haven't got this previously, have we? But we'll pretend we've done a B2 as well. And again, the year for it. And then just then, we're going to output. So in other words, if B1 is greater than B2, then B1 we need to get its title. So that's going to come from the method here. So get title. Is newer. Okay. Then we need to do our else. So else. So I should say output. And then else. We're going to output that B1. Sorry, B2 even. And again, we need to get the title for this one. So get title. And again, just follow the logic. So this one means that this one is now newer. And then we just need to end if, don't we? So how did you do then? If you got 40 plus points, that is absolutely amazing. You really are an expert at this. Well done. 20 plus points is brilliant. Keep going. You're going to get there soon. You're doing extremely well. Anything less than 20, well, obviously there's room for improvement there, but keep trying, keep rewatching explanations, make sure you're clear about what's happening. Do comment below and ask if you're not sure about something. And obviously, please do comment at your scores below. I'd love to know how you're getting on with this. Okay, well, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I really do hope you've found this useful. Please do like and subscribe. It really does help me to help others. Thanks very much.